I mean, how quickly the narrative changes on the AI story, and ASML is helping to drive that change in narrative. At least for now. We're being whipsawed by the news that's coming through across artificial intelligence with DeepSeek at the start of the week, and now ASML on the opposite side of the story, suggesting that the gains are still there for AI. Top level, they came through with sales, as you say, in the fourth quarter that were more than double the estimates. 7 billion euros. The estimates have been for about 3.5 billion, just shy of 3.5 billion euros. Interestingly, within that number, 3 billion came from their most sophisticated, their most pricey pieces of kit. These EUV lithography machines, the size of a bus, cost about 380 million euros. 3 billion euros versus the estimates of 1 billion. And the CEO of ASML, Christophe Fouquet, saying it's clear that AI is the driver, and he says AI is creating a shift in the market. He thinks ASML and others within the semiconductor space will continue to benefit from that. They have an order backlog of around 36 billion euros. That should tie them over nicely for the rest of 2025. There are question marks, though, as to whether or not the capex spending on AI continues next year.
Do you know what I don't get, Tom? Why is ASML up more than 11% this morning when they haven't really explained their position on DeepSeek in these results?
Well, they haven't addressed DeepSeek directly. Do they need to? The numbers speak for themselves, you could argue. And again, the orders coming in, more than double the estimates. Their customers, the key customers are Intel, Samsung and TSMC, the foundry in Taiwan. They are still purchasing their lithography machines, their kit that is so essential for the build out of chips. You cannot make the most sophisticated chips without ASML's equipment. They have a complete grip on this market at the higher end. What you also saw was demand for DUV, so machines that are less sophisticated. They are used, for example, to build chips for electric vehicles. Analysts saying that is likely to sustain a bit of momentum for ASML going forward as well. Again, an order backlog, 36 billion euros. They're still selling into the Chinese markets when they can get around export restrictions with equipment that doesn't have to go through those export restrictions. That is expected to moderate in 2025. The CEO was saying it's going to be a more normal picture in terms of sales into the Chinese market that up until now have made up about 27% of sales into that market as Chinese customers pull forward the demand. So that's the China piece. That will normalize in 2025. But again, the executives are saying they are still seeing tailwinds for this industry. And again, the capex explained and coming through, the promises from Meta and others, 86 billion for Meta, 65 billion for Meta, 80 billion for Microsoft. I guess a big question this week, will they pull back any of those capex spending plans? Because that could impact ASML.
Yeah, indeed. Just a word too on this news that we've had around Microsoft and OpenAI investigating whether data from OpenAI was obtained by a group linked to DeepSeek, which is of course this Chinese AI startup we've been talking about all week. What do we know about this investigation?
Well, it's really consequential. It goes back to the kind of the mood shift and the pivots that we're seeing in terms of how we think about AI and its prospects. And we're shifting again pretty abruptly on the back of this news because Microsoft apparently tipped off OpenAI. Microsoft, of course, has a massive stake in OpenAI. They tipped them off last year that they were starting to see actors in China taking data from their models. It's a process called distilling, where basically you get one small model, you put it alongside an OpenAI much larger model, and you get them to interface, and basically the smaller model is able to suck some of the data, some of the inferencing data, the data that's used when you are actually engaging with the chatbot, with the model, and using that for its own benefit. So essentially piggybacking off some of the work of OpenAI is the allegation. That we haven't had this confirmed, but that certainly is what the AI czar, the head of the Trump administration, is saying. Also what we're hearing from Microsoft, again, according to reports, that would undercut the idea that they've done this on the cheap. It would suggest that actually what they've done is by piggybacking on the work of OpenAI.
Okay.